Session 2, adding color. So I have pulled up 3 different images of Julie, the artist's daughter, and the middle image is the original image that I got off of Wikipedia, and I have taken it into Photoshop and applied a watercolor filter. Actually, this one's called Paint Daubs on the left. And then I added a poster edges filter on top of the paint daubs, which divided the values into recognizable temperatures and values and colors, if you will, all 3. So I'm going to use all 3 images. I feel like these are much lighter, and I like the lightness and airiness of them. This one feels a lot darker. I'm not sure if my original image was darker or what, but I wanted you to see these. And the next thing I do is I spend a little bit of time with searching for my colors in my pastel boxes so that I'm not constantly looking for colors. And I lay those in a little basket with a paper towel. If you're using pencils, I would go ahead and pull out every color that you think you see, a dark, medium, light of your browns, some oranges for the lips and ears. I see, especially in these with the filter, I see this sky blue color. I see some lavender over here, the blue and lavender mixed on this left image. Of course, the skin tones and white, a couple of different skin tones, and a peachy color. So typically I'll end up with a full pastel with about 40 colors. This is just a quick drawing that she did with, and you can see that the temperatures are different. In these poster edge filters, they're much bluer. This middle image is more lavender. So you can pick which one you like and go with that. But I think it's nice to look at these different options, because sometimes when you put a filter on an image, it gives you ideas for what you might not see readily. And I think it's good to always be mindful of what your eye is going to have a preconceived notion about. So the first thing I did was I looked at my image again. It's still a little bit off drawing wise, but I'm going to get it as close as I can. I really like the softness of this Paint Daubs filter, and I think I'm going to use that one to start along with this poster edge filter, because that shows me the little pieces of color and where to lay those in. And hopefully I'm going to be able to correct around her jaw and her eyes, which are my big problem areas on this drawing with this sandpaper. I like to start with the darkest dark, even though it's not a have to with pastel, because you don't have any paint mixing going on. But I am going to go ahead and lay in my darkest darks first. And remember, your first marks are usually very linear, especially if you're using a small pastel. But it's good to go ahead and register these. This is an old Sargent pastel that I've had for a really long time. When you go to the art store and you're looking for something to buy, as if you need an excuse, always look for dark browns for your pastels. Dark, any color, dark greens, dark browns. Those are always needed. The ones in the new pastel set are not near dark enough. Almost black right here. And if you don't have a really dark brown, go ahead and just use a little bit of black in these areas and put brown over the top of it with the pastels. All right, then I'm going to move to the next color I have in my browns, which is the one I've already been using, kind of a reddish brown. Not really too red, it's just a flat brown. Then I'm going to go, I have this kind of a burnt sienna color. It may just be a dirty pastel, I'll find out. And, you know, make a few notes and then step back and look at it from a distance. But you know, there's two different pressures with pastel. If you press really hard, you're going to get this. If you press really light, you're going to just barely deposit a little bit of a peachy orange color that you can then scumble over with flesh and neutralize it. So don't be afraid to pop on some pretty color right now that will glow up through your skin tones. I have watched artists demonstrate that use bright orange all over the whole face to start with. And then they blend it down in areas. Anywhere you think you see that orangish color. I see a lot of it up over her eyes. I see a little bit of it as you move up the bridge of the nose right there. A lot of it in her lips. All right. Then I'm going to move to an even lighter orange. So I'm kind of moving down the value scale, starting with the darker color, moving into the lighter. That's more yellow up there. And you're just depositing little tiles of color at this point. You're not really making things perfect. There's a little piece of red right here, or this darker orange. And there. And there. All right, then I'm going to move, I'm again moving up the scale to another skin tone, which is kind of an orange color. Let's see, I'm going to test it out. Maybe too light. It's real easy to go straight into the skin tone and make everything very chalky and too light. So it's better off if you'll start with some cooler tones. This cool tone along her hair is a cool, I don't know, it's a gray, but I'm going to start off with this blue. I see that everywhere. I've got a brighter blue here. There's green right here. I didn't pull any green out, so I'll have to go get a green pastel here in a bit. There's a cool tone in her eye, so I don't know if her eyes are blue. There's a little bit of cool tone inside of her, on her eye white, right there next to the iris. Thinking about this in little tiles of color. It's more yellow or ochre across the forehead. The midsection is usually a pink or orange tone, and sometimes there'll be lots of cool shadows and cool tones in the lower section of the face. You can see some of those down here. And I can see the breakdown a lot better in this one of the individual colors. So I'm going to move that one over a little closer. So I forgot to mention that I usually put a piece of aluminum foil under my. Okay, so I put a little bit of aluminum foil. I made a little tray to catch the excess, and you don't always think to do that until the dust starts flying around. You want to try to keep from breathing that in if possible. And I also pulled out a couple of additional colors. I did not have enough lights, so I have pulled out a very, very light flesh tone. It is a new pastel and a light yellow in the new pastel set. And a little bit darker yellow because I see some yellow tones on her forehead especially. That is a number 213 in the set. So I'm going to start laying some of those in, close to the same thing. But I want some light tones for her cheek area. And it's oversaturated it on this poster filter. So I'm going to move this one in so I can show you the difference in that color. Your brain wants to go for the white right there, and that is not white. This would be white. So you can see the difference in those two. There's not any pure white on here, most likely. I'm going to say possibly, but it's probably this very, very light yellow. You can see the difference in this light yellow and that light pink. If you can get away with it, try not to use white. I don't ever look at skin and read it as being white. So just be mindful of what you see in real life and what you observe. And again, your pressure makes a lot of difference. If you're pushing hard, you're going to get a lighter touch, a lighter registered color. When you're going over another color, it's wise to try to use a similar value. Don't switch your values too much, too quickly. The side of her mouth comes up a little bit. And that beautiful orange color on her lips, I don't really have that out. I'm going to deposit a little of this Sennelier color on there. I've had some time now, a couple of days away from this, and which is really a good idea because you can come back in and see it with totally different eyes. Lots of things wrong with it. And it's so funny how you can be going along and think it's pretty good, and then you come back and look at it and go, oh my goodness, no, it's not. So first thing I can tell is this is not wide enough. This is off right here. You can see how close her hair is to her eyebrow. And the eyebrow wraps around this way. So you can see that this eyebrow wraps right along in line with the eye, and then the hair is really close. So I'll check that. Something still seems off here, and of course her eyes seem a little bit off. Her nose is smaller, and I have these dark marks here, which will help. What I want you to see here is that typically it's a lot of tiny things that need to be corrected that make a difference. And you can see these dark spots anchor the hair, the head, and they kind of move the eye around. And I have a little bit of that, but they're not accurate. So I made them the same size as close as possible. In preview, you can go to your edit option here. Whoops, not that one. You can go to, let's see, this little box right here, image dimensions. And I just made it a little tiny bit smaller. It lets you choose inches, 5 inches wide. And it'll automatically scale it proportionally. So that helps, because when I look at them, if she's a lot bigger, I'm going to constantly be judging it. So that it helps me to have them the same size, especially for this checking up. I can tell right off the bat she's too round here. Maybe a little bit of adjustment here on the chin, on the bottom here. So I'm going to use my darkest brown that I have in my box. If you don't have this, you could almost go to a black and carve that down a bit. So you can see, wow, look how far off I am there. And this plumb line is just in from her tear duct. So that's right. So I need to come pretty far in here with this. That's going to make a difference. I want to get that dark enough. Same over here. I can check the width of her nose. And it's right. And then from the side of her nose to the side of the face is right. So it just has to do with angles around this face. Let me also check from the bottom of her mouth to the bottom of her chin. And go ahead and deposit. You know, this is not a full-on pastel. It's just a quick rendering. It is not really blended. It's an alla prima session, most likely. Now, usually when I'm working in pastel, I'll deposit all these colors like this, and then I find sort of a unifying color. This is a medium to medium dark flesh tone. It's kind of peachy. This one is a little bit more, less saturated with color. And then I just kind of use that to tie things together a little bit more. This one is not, again, there's not a lot of strong blending going on. It's just little pops of color. See, that's lighter than you think when you put it on the pastel. You have a bit of the feeling of the top of her head. And you can see kind of a plane change here. Maybe this way, and then this way. And you have to kind of imagine that when you're working in art. You have to think about if you were to put a box over it, or putting dimensional quality on it, because you're working on a flat surface and it'll just feel, everything about it will feel very flat if you don't think in terms of dimension. And I've critiqued a few this week, so be careful with these strands of hair. You do well to think in rhythm and sort of rehearse your strokes, before you actually hit the canvas. So it still looks, something looks weird through here. This just looks so much wider than this one. Maybe not, but something seems off. So I'm going to measure the side of the mouth, and that comes just down through the middle of her eye. So I believe that's part of my problem. This mouth comes over just a bit more. And on this side, it comes down just from the iris here. And this little light plane bumps right up to here. There we go. I have some pencils now. I went on and picked out a handful of pencils. Once I deposit color with the pastel sticks, I like to go back. There's just a general range of the colors that I've used. I like to get a light, medium flesh tone, a lip color, a cheek color. I've got a little bit of the blue. I may go pull out a couple more, but this helps me kind of move the color around on the surface a little bit so that it's not so broken up, like with these lips. And I'm going to zoom in and do a little bit of work on the eyes because they are pretty blotchy here. No pure white. This is a pinkish color. And really it's a little darker than that. It's more like a fleshy color inside this one. I always ask myself, I think I mentioned this already, but I ask myself when working on the whites of the eyes, are they cool with some blue tones? Are they fleshy with some warm tones? And oftentimes they're a combination of both. So you can ask yourself that. Pupils are always black. I do not have a black pastel out right now, but they are. Doesn't look like she may have used a black. I don't know. And there's no pupil really in that one. But I can't stand to not put one in, so. Think about rhythms as you wrap the hair around the face. Just, it's really important. Otherwise you'll get too stiff. Not sure what it is. I believe it's the iris comes down. Typically you lose the ability to erase on pastel after you get very much on there, but something seems wrong. So this is like a slope that goes upwards, and it kind of levels off here. This is an angle here that goes down. Straight over. To get her eyes right, they're really sultry, and you just have to kind of figure out where the lines melt and where they open back up again. A lot of red tones around her eyes, which I usually stay away from because they can make it look really like almost like the person has pink eye. Remember this rhythm here that wraps. So now to try to look at it as a whole, there's the way the rhythm goes around the face is, you know, you can work on little bits and pieces. Then you want to kind of tie them all together and see what is it that's bumping out funny. And you kind of see this connects with this. This flattens out. There's a little bit of this color here. I'm just using pure white because the other color's not registering. Use whatever you have. If you have to use pure white, then come back over it with a little bit of flesh tone just to warm it up so it doesn't look so chalky. And this opens up. So watch for places where the eye melts and it doesn't look so drawn and almost fake. It can be flattened out and look cartoonish if you're not careful. So and this brow is a little too high. How to take something totally off. You just take your pastel and cover over it. I like to start with a smaller, a closer value. I don't go real light to start with. lose a little bit of that line in there so it's not so hard around the chin. There is a light piece around her cheek that's real pretty. Well, something helped it just then as I kind of tied all the pieces together. So I'm going to go back to pastels because the pencils really just mush it, take a lot of the vibrancy away. I'm going to come back in here with a pastel because it deposits a little bit more color. That's probably too light. The cheek is standing out a little too much, so I know I've overshot that, made it too light right here. So come back in with a little bit of a darker flesh, tone that down. Capturing essentials. That's our plan. Try not to paint every single stroke. See what she saw. A bit of light right there. Just saw that. It's funny how you can look at something for a long time and just a little bit of light right here, the bottom of her eye. Just that little piece that will help brighten it up, wake it up. A little bit too bright, so again, I put it in, I take it off. I put it in, I take it off. Really shouldn't be using the pure white, but it's hard to get this sandy paper to register. So I'm going to go with a little bit darker over that white just to warm it up. I am going to fix those eyebrows a bit. They're kind of a reddish tone or orange, burnt sienna. And eyebrows are really important. If you have them too high or too low, they will look funny. And Jeanette measured these eyes and found that they were different sizes. So again, when you're working alla prima, when you're working on capturing essentials, it's not so much about an exact likeness as it is capturing the essence of what's in front of you, a mood or a characteristic that you can't really put your finger on. Kinsler talked about painting John Wayne and how when it was all said and done, he delivered the portrait, that he measured it out before he left and it was not right. The measurements were off. But when he delivered it, out of all the paintings done of John Wayne, John Wayne's son said he just really captured him. And it was more about the essence, the posture, the way he stood, the capturing that fleeting moment. I think that's what we're after. And that takes a little bit more time, a little bit more knowledge and understanding than to just be a copyist, which is my default mode. I get in there trying to measure and make everything exact, and somehow I lose the beauty sometimes of what's in front of me. I think I have her upper lip a little too wide, but I'm not going to stress over it. And this is pretty much an orange color on her lips. Lots of little orange tones bouncing around in here. At the end, to just go back and try to pick up those rhythms again, because again I got so caught up in the piecemeal way of working on this that I lost some of the rhythm. Very, very important element. This here looks funny. So let me see if I can fix that a bit. Looks heavy over there. That's the thing, there's a real separation here that I don't have as well. And I used some bright orange right here to try to get that to pop just under her eye here. But the way the hair wraps here is important. So came back in and fixed that. This comes just over from her eye, kind of straight down here. Then in. Out that way. Then there's this separation here of value that goes this way and that way into the bow and then up. So maybe I could, I think I have this too wide here. Let's measure it. When all else fails, measure. From the edge of the ear to her tear duct. Make sure I'm measuring that right. is the same as the highest point on her brow to her nostril. Now what I measure? Tear duct to the edge of her ear. Now that's right. Highest point on her brow. So that's right. So something is off right here a little bit. It's this roundness right here. Comes out and then back in. There. That's better. Much better. And then this is still a bit too wide. I think it's this lower part of the ear maybe. Now let's measure from this bow. Let's say the side of her nose. All right, so that bow stops right there, and that's about right. All right, I think I'm going to call it done. You can just work it to death, and you can lose some of the spontaneity of it. Get my eraser here and clean it up a little bit around the periphery. That always makes me feel better at the end. It's easy to make things dirty when you're doing pastel. Don't blow, thump. Or get your clean brush and knock that eraser debris off. It certainly holds on to this sandpaper, that's for sure. And I blew again, so it's a no-no. Okay, I'm going to give it one last run over because I see some errors. Mostly mine looks too dark. So I put them side by side and took an image of them. Here is the color version. And you can see mine is quite a bit darker. My photograph is a little darker than the actual painting. You can see here, a little bit darker. I'm going to soften up a few things. I noticed that the chin is a little bit too long. So from the nostril to the chin, and from the low point on her brow to the nostril is the same. See, I've got her chin a little bit too long. And again, just working on this, it's easy to get off. I lowered the eyebrows, which is probably why that's happened. Had the eyebrows up too high, I think, before. The black around the eyes is too harsh, so I'm going to go in and soften that up as I'm going to soften up a little bit of the hair. I just got a little carried away with my darks and it's looking too harsh. So that's my next step and my last step. So first thing I'm going to fix is the chin. That's the biggest mistake that I see. The further you go in your pastel, the more you can use softer pastels. They will cover easier. So I'm going to double check that. All right, let's see where my line should go, right about here. And it changes angle about here. And I put a much softer line in there. I got a little too bold with my lines. Whoops. Dog sitting, so sorry about that. Her cheek has gotten a little too wide. A little too narrow right here. So that's a back and forth thing. It does bump out just over from the lip right here. Maybe not that much. Back and forth, back and forth. All right, and I wanted to soften these lines around her eyes so they're not so harsh. So you see how just going back with a flesh tone or just very, very light touch can help you soften some things that are standing out. This is almost the color of my background. It's a really hard Chinese pastel that I got. So sometimes you can purchase little cheapo sets that I got this years and years ago, and it's one of my favorite sets because they're hard, they blend well. There's an angle on this jaw that I don't really have, and that's kind of nice. A little bit lighter. Still kind of heavy through the lids here, so let me see if I can soften this black color up just a bit.